So thank you, everyone, and welcome to session 6C. We thought that it would be appropriate to actually have Wayne's video up on this session rather than having another partner session there. So on behalf of the symposium, first of all, we'd like to thank you, our attendees, for dialing into this session. And second of all, we'd like to thank the tireless work that Wayne has been doing, being the track moderator for all of these sessions. We thought we would save him having to do the track moderation for this session, and we would jump and do it for him. So welcome to session 6C, where we'll actually be able to talk about the making self-service work, how to empower, align, and retain data analytics from the person himself, Wayne Eckerson from Eckerson Group. Wayne, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Robert. I'm honored that you would give the introduction here. That's great. So let me just share my screen. And I think you can see it, right?
Yep.
All right. Awesome. Well, Robert already mentioned the title here. Self-service and data analysts are two topics near and dear to my heart. I thought I was going to have to introduce myself, so I did have a few bio slides here.
Oh, you can give the people a background of yourself, so it's important.
All right, great. Well, I've been doing this, data and analytics, for over 25 years, writing about it, researching, speaking, and consulting. I've written way too many articles and reports, and 2 books, actually, and we'll reference one of them today. I now am president of Eckerson Group, which you can see there provides research, consulting, and advisory services for data and analytics leaders worldwide. On our consulting side, we do have a lot of brand name customers and non-brand name customers, big customers, small, US and non-US based, mainly helping them build data strategies, data governance programs, self-service analytics strategies, and the like. So normally you start a presentation with an agenda, what you're going to talk about today. I thought I'd start with a quiz. So I'm not fooling, so get a pencil out and a piece of paper, if you will. And I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Actually, I'm going to mention a series of statements. And for each statement, I want you to write a number between 1 and 4, whether you agree with that statement entirely, or just agree with it, or disagree with it, or disagree entirely. And these statements, in essence, are kind of a summary of the whole presentation, some of the key points that we'll be covering during the day. So think of this as a little bit of a prequel, but also it might start to raise some questions that hopefully we'll answer during this session. So you ready? All right, here we go. First question, and there's 15 of these. Our data analysts can't keep up with business requests. In effect, they've become a bottleneck to getting answers to questions and creating that culture of analytics that we all want. Do you agree entirely with that? Put 1. If you disagree entirely with that, put 4. All right. Number 2, our data analysts are order takers who do not work strategically with business partners. Yeah, they don't ask probing questions to really find out what they're trying to accomplish. They just take the request at face value and begin working on it. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay, here we go. We'll start picking up the pace now. 3, our data analysts build lots of disconnected dashboards, creating a fragmented view of data for business users. Largely, that's because a lot of data analysts are very question or project specific focused, and they're not kind of looking at the departmental needs as a whole. Number 4, many of our data analysts are glorified report writers. In some cases, they may not really deserve the title of analyst, but that's one of the most abused titles in the business lexicon. Number 5, our data analysts lack sufficient domain or business knowledge to be effective. Perhaps they're sitting centrally as a shared service, or they're new to the organization. Number 6, our data analysts have trouble communicating findings that business people can actually act on. I should probably say actually understand and then act on. This is a big bottleneck. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Number 7, our data analysts are isolated in departments and rarely interact with each other. I see that as a pretty common phenomenon. Number 8, our data analysts spend more time finding and cleaning data than analyzing it. Oh yeah, see that all the time. Number 9, our data analysts never rotate through departments or build cross-functional knowledge, and hence never ask the really important, valuable questions that oftentimes are cross-functional in nature. Number 10, our data analysts lack curiosity to explore data beyond actual projects. One, because they're too busy meeting their deadlines. This is especially important for data scientists, which are a form of data analysts. We'll talk about that in a second. Number 11, our data analysts spend more time maintaining past reports than building new ones. See this a lot. There's no mechanism to productionize reports and get them off the hands of analysts, which means they have less time to answer those valuable business questions. Number 12, our data analysts continually reinvent the wheel, basically analyzing the same question that others have already worked on, and rarely reuse work from other analysts. Often a symptom of being siloed and buried in departments. Number 13, our data analysts create more reports than they decommission, creating report sprawl. Number 14, our analysts don't apply the right type of analysis, like descriptive to diagnostic, predictive to individual business questions, which means essentially they don't have the repertoire of skills needed to be effective. And finally, 15, business people don't view data analysts as strategic partners or resources. They really view them as order takers, not consultative resources. Okay, so quickly add up your scores and let's see what you got. Here's the rubric here. If you scored between 45 and 60, I'd say you have a world-class data analyst network. And that's probably a term you've never heard of before. It's because most people don't view their data analyst as a network or ecosystem to be managed. And that's what this whole presentation is about. If you score between 30 and 60, you have a strong data analyst network, could be better. 15 to 30, it's pretty ineffective. And 0 to 15, it's quite dysfunctional or does not exist. So I hope you scored well. If you didn't, stick around and we'll talk about how to improve that score. But first things first, what is a data analyst? So I've been making the assumption that you all know what that is, or we all agree on what it is. No one agrees on what a data analyst is, but let me just give you some perspective and context. They go by many different titles, often business analyst, which is a title I used to use until I realized that a whole sector of the IT department was calling certain folks business analysts, whose job mainly was to gather requirements from the business and feed them to application developers. So they were business requirements analysts, but they really dropped that middle word there and became business analysts. So that's why I call these folks data analysts. Also known as power users, Excel jockeys, Tableau gurus, departmental analysts, data lieutenant to a business unit head or department head, data mashup artist who can pull data together from different places and create a dashboard on it, or a data scientist, which is kind of a form of data analyst. A data scientist really needs more training in statistics and analytical modeling to get that moniker. So there is a slight difference between a data analyst and a data scientist. Data scientist typically has more training, but there's no reason a data analyst can't do some data science work and move up and become a full-fledged data scientist with the right training. So what do? They essentially report to a department head and answer their ad hoc business questions using data. Essentially, every department head or business unit head has a data analyst or 2 or 3 in their back pocket to answer tough questions with data. That's how I see a data analyst. So what are the skills of a data analyst? Ideally, curiosity and the desire to explore issues using data, ability to write SQL and understand statistics, at least, maybe if taken 1 or 2 courses in college, the ability to create dashboards, in other words, descriptive analytics, as well as to apply diagnostic and predictive analytics where necessary. And perhaps the most important, and we'll dwell on this a little bit later, very strong communications and interpersonal skills. So data analysts play many roles in different organizations, and those roles tend to evolve over time. And in a large organization, you might see multiple roles at the same time, as we'll see later on. But I created this chart to kind of show the evolution of a data analyst individually as well as organizationally. So the left axis or y-axis shows accessibility and availability of data and the ability to use it. So in other words, self-service. And the x-axis is complexity of business questions. So the more data is available and accessible and the more users are able to leverage it, the complexity of the questions that business people ask increases. Well, that makes perfect sense. A number of years ago, and still in many companies, the accessibility is low, hence the complexity of business questions and the volume of questions is pretty low. So we're pretty much in a reporting environment where your data analysts are compiling operational statistics and maybe answering some performance questions, creating KPIs for performance reviews and maybe pricing and things like that if you're in the finance department or product department. But as we increase the accessibility and availability of data, we begin to ask more and better questions. And these analysts now are doing what I would call analysis, typically bringing multiple sets of data together, mashing them up, and doing cross-functional analysis, creating custom cohorts and doing analysis around those groups, so on and so forth, asking and getting answers to more valuable questions. And then finally, at the highest levels of accessibility and self-service, our analysts are creating predictive models or creating more complex models that really have a lot of value to the business. So analysts individually can evolve up this curve, and organizationally, organizations and departments inside organizations should aspire to move up this curve. So why should we care about data analysts? Why should we focus an entire session on them? Well, in most organizations, they are the most active users of data. And as such, they have the heaviest requirements and make the greatest demands on the enterprise or corporate data and analytics team. As such, they can be huge political assets if treated well, and they get what they need and want to do their jobs efficiently and effectively, or they can be huge liabilities. In other words, they can be your biggest advocates if you're trying to deliver a huge new strategy or infrastructure, or they can be your biggest detractors, making your job much harder. Ultimately, they're a bridge to the business. They sit in the business. They're your eyes and ears in the business. They can help you understand what's going on. And they are the leading edge of requirements for the next generation of your data warehouse or the next release or the next 12 to 18 months. In fact, I've known many architects who design data environments around the requirements of the power users, thinking that if we can solve their needs and address their requirements, we're going to catch everybody else as well. Also, they're very pivotal in data literacy because they're sitting in the business, and ideally the business users should be able to turn to them and ask simple questions about how to do things. And those data analysts can train business users who can then train others and support other business users, and it cascades down in a nice way to really create an informal process flow surrounding your data literacy program. And we'll see that a little bit more in a bit. Also, this last one here is interesting. Collectively, they are very expensive. And what I'm always surprised at is most companies have no idea how much they're spending on data analysts because they don't track them in the aggregate. When we consult with an organization, there's two things we ask at the outset. Can you give us a diagram of your data environment? And two, can you give us an org chart or an ecosystem chart of all your data analysts embedded in the departments? Sometimes we get the first, the architectural diagram. We never get the second. So we have to work with organizations to get that. And this is what we did at a university. And they realized that they had 87.5 FTE data analysts across all their departments and colleges. And we assumed that they weren't all full-time, but the cost, if you add this up, was in the tens of millions of dollars. So I always think this is a very powerful reminder to both the data leaders and business leaders that, it's really important to address the needs of this audience and align them with your corporate strategy and your data strategy. So ask, is your company getting sufficient value from its investments in data analysts? I would dare say for most companies, it's not, because a lot of these folks are disconnected, they're isolated, they're buried in the bowels of these departments. They're not reusing all those things that we covered in the quiz. All right, so just trying to keep track of time here. I think we ended at 5:15, Robert, right?
That is correct. Yep, 5:15. You still got another 20 minutes.
All right, cool. All right, so we're going to talk about three topics, how to align data analysis. The first one, so let's jump right into this. To align data analysis, I firmly believe you need an enterprise organizational framework. Some people call this an operating model. Some people call it a center of excellence. But if you look at the block on the blue blocks on the left, that's your departments, and inside the departments are your data analysts, and they are technical generalists and domain specialists, which means they specialize in that business. The red box on the right is your enterprise or corporate data and analytics team, comprised of technical specialists, but domain generalists. So in many ways, it's a match made in heaven, but most organizations, that line, whether dotted or straight, does not exist at all. Okay, let me drill down a little bit more for each. So the departmental analysts, they typically report to business unit department leaders. They build the local apps, reports, dashboards. They answer those ad hoc questions from the business unit head. That's pretty much what they do on a day-to-day basis. The enterprise team, their job really is to manage enterprise data and build cross-functional enterprise apps that no one department or business unit is going to build, and then provide training and support across the enterprise, especially to data analysts. So the most important element of this figure right here is that dotted line. Well, what is that? That's really the alignment that we're talking about. So how does this work here? So there's a few things that the enterprise team can provide to the embedded data analysts. One, they can hire, train, and evaluate their performance. I wonder how many of you in your organizations are doing that right now. That's really powerful if you can do it. The enterprise team also, through an analytics council, can start to convey best practices and standards, whether it's tools or processes, prioritization frameworks, et cetera, and try to inculcate those into the behavior and activities of the departmental groups. And then finally, coach and support. And they're the first point of support for these analysts who have questions perhaps that they don't know how to answer, or the technical capabilities of the tool or the question are beyond them. So someone needs to provide support. So that's what the enterprise team can do for the departmental data analysts in this dotted line. And there's also things that the departmental data analysts do for the enterprise team to make this more symbiotic. Well, the first thing is that they are increasingly offloading local development. They're building the dashboards and reports that the enterprise team used to build. Now we're in the age of self-service. Hopefully they're doing it. And hopefully they're doing it in a governed, aligned way. That's the big caveat. They can also consolidate requirements for bigger requests that the enterprise team would have to work on that might require cross-functional capabilities or just things that beyond the ken of what the business analysts, data analysts can do. And then they can promote data literacy by helping to support, coach, mentor data usage of business people that they work with on a day-to-day basis. All right, so that's pretty good. We'll drill down in the next slide what that dotted line looks like from a reporting structure. But this framework is not complete because there's other things that are needed to make it really work. So the first thing is, if we consider this an ecosystem or a center of excellence that spans the entire enterprise and all the departments and business units, you need cross-functional oversight. And for me, that means you need an analytics council. And a council really is a board of directors for data and analytics. And their job, and sometimes there's a working committee and an executive committee, their job is really to review the strategy that's proposed by the enterprise team, refine it, approve it, and fund it. But beyond that, especially the working committee will do a lot of work, like prioritizing projects, defining standards, developing best practices, and promulgating them through the enterprise. So there's a lot that goes into that council. Now, there's one more thing that I think is required in this organizational framework, and we heard a lot of it in the session before this on data literacy. We need cross-functional forums for these data analysts and the data scientists, essentially community of practices that pulls them out of their departments so they're not so isolated, help them learn from each other, share tips, tricks, and code, do this virtually, do this in person, gamification, visathons. Ideally, they're all working on the same platform, so it's easy for them to see what others are doing and reuse their work. So that's really important. So I'd love to know what you think of this framework. But let's now drill down on the dotted line from a reporting perspective. So what is that dotted line made of? Well, there's a number of ways to kind of organize the analysts. You can see 4 ways here. The first one, decentralized silo, and the last one, centralized shared. There really is no line at all. It's not even dotted. The 2 in the middle really are the dotted line. But let's talk about the first and last here for a second. So in a decentralized model, the analysts sit in the department, they report to the department head, they're managed by the department head, and they're paid by the department. Okay, so there's some benefits. They get good domain knowledge of that department, and the departments get to control their destiny. But there's some big problems. One, the departments oftentimes don't know how to hire these analysts, and they don't hire the right people, so they don't work out too well. The analysts are not managed or coached or evaluated because no one knows how to do that in the department. So they become very isolated, prone to leave the company, easy targets for recruiters. And there's no economies of scale here. It becomes very costly. And if the CFO or CEO gets wind of this, they automatically jump to the other model, the centralized shared model, where we're going to take all these analysts out of the department and put them in a shared service at corporate and then farm them out as needed. Well, that makes a lot of sense to a CFO, lots of economies of scale. From the data leader's perspective, wow, this is good because they're all together. Now it's easier to manage them and have them work in a collaborative way, which makes them more productive and helps them learn faster about how to solve problems and work with the business. But there are problems with this too. So if they're sitting centrally, they're not gaining any domain knowledge, right? So that's a huge problem. If you don't have the domain knowledge, it's really hard to answer business questions quickly and efficiently. Departments have to sit in long lines and wait for their questions to be answered. So it's a bottleneck. They lose control. And, whenever that happens, what do the department heads do? Well, they use their budget and they hire their own analysts, and they go back to the centralized model. So a lot of companies have both of these things coexisting, right? And they're not getting a lot of value from either of the models. So what we coach folks to do is to take more of a federated approach using one of these models here. So the first one, decentralized coached, the analysts sit in the department, they report to the department head, but they're managed, hired, coached, evaluated by the corporate team who has assigned at least one person for a specific number of analysts, or if not all of them in a smaller organization, to do that work. And they're oftentimes paid by the department. So I've seen that model and that works. The next model, centralized align, is where they actually sit at corporate, but they report to the department and probably spend a lot of their time there, but their desk really is at corporate. So they get the benefit of the collaboration. They're managed by corporate, which makes it easier since they're sitting centrally. And they're paid by, well, it could be the department, honestly, it could be corporate, or it could be a mix of the two. And I've seen all those variations. So what are the benefits and problems here? Well, in some ways, you marry the best of both worlds. You get economies of scale. The analysts get domain knowledge because if you do this right, they're aligned with a single department for a long period of time, even though they don't always sit there. It's easier to rotate them through domains, which is really important to elevate the long-term skills and productivity of these analysts. And it's easier to manage them, and it's easier for them to collaborate. So the problems is that the political, really, the department heads have to cede some control. I think once they do this, they realize it's actually going to work out in their favor in the long run. There are instances where departments may have specific needs, or they don't want to wait for the corporate team to hire someone, and they will hire someone, and that's okay, as long as everyone knows what's happening and why they're doing it. So I'd love to talk to you all more about these models and what would be most appropriate for you. But let's move on, because we don't have a lot of time here.
And Wayne, just as an FYI, there are a couple of questions that relate to the framework. So there does seem to be some interest on that as well. Just I put them into the chat for you.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, I kind of thought this was an hour session. Silly me.
Yeah, we got another 10 minutes max.
Yeah, so let me go through this. I think I can fly through this.
And maybe tell people how they can actually get I'm sure you got a slide at the end, but how they can get a hold of you afterwards as well.
Yeah, Wayne@Eckerson.com. That's a big, that's an easy one. All right, so I kind of mentioned this trickle-down support as part of your data literacy program. The enterprise team trains and coaches the analysts. The analysts, in turn, deliver requirements and sometimes prototypes that the team can build. And then this keeps cascading down. The analysts can support and coach the data explorers that are basically data consumers who love to do a little bit more than just view things and interact with them. Those explorers can send requests up to the analysts, and so on and so forth, down to the data consumers, who are 60% of your organization. Explorers are typically 30%, your analysts are typically 8%. Your scientists are typically 2%. I'm always surprised very few companies have a help desk that can help offload some of the requests that come out of the business user community for learning how to use a tool, logging on, where to find certain reports, things like that. It could be a good place for a help desk. And those help desks, if they field requests that are more complex, they'll send them along to the appropriate body. So think about that as a way to improve your data literacy program. Informal networks, really. I've always encouraged companies also not just to create a data strategy for the enterprise, but create a data strategy for each department. I haven't seen anyone who really does this, so if you've done it, let me know. And I'm just stabbing in the dark here what this might be, but let's create a 3 to 5 year program where a department with a data analyst working in concert with the enterprise team defines that roadmap, which might be, hey, let's build a core operational dashboard that answers 80% of the business users' questions right out of the box. I'm surprised how many departments don't have that. Even though they have data analysts, they don't have this. It's because the data analysts are answering, ad hoc questions. They're not kind of looking at that department as a whole. From there, it might be, let's work with the enterprise team to create a core data mart that will facilitate our ad hoc questions and make that a lot easier and help us become more self-sufficient so we don't have to wait for the enterprise team to get the data set for us. And they can work with the data team to prototype that data mart and the model behind it. So on and so forth until you get perhaps, let's build a core analytical model that will drive a lot of the effectiveness of our department, whether it's a retention model or a cross-sell model. So something like this, I think, would be really valuable, but I haven't seen anyone do it yet. All right, how to empower data analysts. 2 prongs here. One is culturally and the other is technically. So let's talk about culturally here. Communication is the absolute key. So many analysts aren't really good at this, and that's a big problem. Yeah, Ken Rudin, in the last book I wrote, Secrets of Analytical Leaders, he had these pithy aphorisms. Focus on questions, not answers. You know, answers are easy. Getting good questions that really help drive the business are hard. Focus on impacts, not insights. Insights are a dime a dozen, don't do anything for the business. If you're not creating an insight that drives and impacts the business in a positive way, you know, all the money the company's spending on you is for naught. So those are quotes from Ken, who's director of analytics at Zynga, Facebook, and Google. And my take on that is be a consultant, not an order taker. That's how you should train your analysts to be, to think strategically, not tactically. And this is a big change. And then also from the book, we talk a lot about actionable insights, like that's the goal. That's not the goal. The goal is to produce results, and actionable insight that no one acts on is absolutely worthless. So we got to kind of reset our mindset to understand what our value is to the company and really train our analysts to deliver that. So asking the right questions, it's so important. You know, your analysts really have to be like journalists. They can't take anything at face value. So here's some great questions. What are you trying to accomplish? I know what you want, but what are you trying to accomplish? And what's it worth to you? You know, how much would this be worth, or what's the value of it? And can you measure it? And if we give you this information, what actions will you actually take as a result? And 4, are you ready to implement those actions? Surprisingly, most business leaders will ask for things, ask for data, ask for insights, but they're really not ready to take action. So you might want to say, when you're ready, come back to us, because we have a lot of other questions we got to address. And on the flip side, once you deliver the answer, you got to deliver it in a compelling way that resonates with the business. So a lot of these came from Kathleen Maley, who runs Maley Analytics, was a director of an analytics center of excellence at several large financial institutions. And she validated a lot of things that I've learned and been talking to people about. One of her big things was, when you deliver an answer to a business person, to their business question, put everything on one slide. If you want to make your analysts squirm, make them do that. That's going to be almost impossible for all of them, but so important to do right. State the question. So here's the slide format. State the question or hypothesis, provide the conclusion with supporting data. Never, ever, ever describe the steps you use to get there. You've just bored and confused the business person, and they won't do anything with your analysis. So some pithy words for the wise there. This is also from Kathleen. You know, besides the individual discussions analysts have with business people, you need to have structured conversations between the enterprise team, in her case, the Analytics Center of Excellence, and each department head. So she had 2 meetings, one semi-annual where the department lays out its strategy, the lead analyst for that department outlines current projects and requests, and then they reprioritize. It's usually a half-day session twice a year. Then every month you kind of relook at that prioritization and revalidate, rejigger it if need be. That's usually an hour session. And then every week your analysts, however you group them, should meet weekly to discuss their projects. And in some cases, the head of the COE can consolidate requests and reiterate the core things they need to do to be successful. Typically a 2-hour session. I'm sorry I'm going so fast, but I want to finish. This is what gets all the attention in the press and the news media out there. You know, the workflow the analysts use and the tools that they use to do each of these steps. I'll let you look at this, right? You need a lot of tools to be a data analyst, is the bottom line here. And right now, all these tools are purpose-built. So what we need and what we're seeing happening is the convergence of these tools into a self-service, what I call self-service analytics workbench. So here's some companies that provide these purpose-built capabilities, but we're seeing that a lot of them are expanding into adjacent areas, which makes sense. That happens all the time. And some startups are actually trying to go even better and do the whole kit and caboodle. So it's kind of interesting time to do self-service analytics for these reasons. All right, I got 3 minutes to talk about how to retain data analysts. This will be fun. Data analysts are sharp, they're bright, they're usually young, they're ambitious. They want to know, they want to see the future. They want to know the steps to get to the goal, right? And if you don't provide that, they get restless, they get confused, they might even get depressed and leave, right? So I think you need to have some very clear career paths. And I've spent a number of years trying to put together a diagram that actually shows career paths for primarily for data analysts, but you can see there's a lot of other roles here. It's a little bit of an eyesore here as a chart, and you'll have to study this, but you'll see that the right side of the chart, the red is for people who are more technology focused. The left side's for people who are more business focused. The red boxes are people who report to corporate. The blue boxes are people who report to business unit or department. The purple people are matrixed. And guess what? Those are your data analysts. They're not only matrix, they sit right between, they straddle the business world and the technology world. So for career paths, there's a number here. Well, there's an analyst track, right? And you can be an analyst and stay an analyst. And if you want, even move up to become a data scientist if you get additional training. If you want, you can also go on the management track. So you can start to run these divisions and departments of the centers of excellence and maybe the whole kit and caboodle. You could go into the business as a data analyst. That's really pretty cool because you're getting all this domain knowledge. You may even end up knowing the business better than the product managers. So why not become one? Or a data steward on top of that. You could go into IT, maybe maybe a BI developer, maybe if you're really interested in data engineering. Or you could take the governance track and start to run the governance for organizations, which is increasingly important, not just for data and reports, but also for AI and ML models. So I encourage you to study this a little bit more and give me feedback. It's not perfect. And every organization is different. And it's for a large company, by the way. I have ones for small and medium-sized company. The other thing for retention is analyst rotation. Get your analysts to rotate through different departments. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here on how you might do that, but you can do that for data analysts and data scientists. So in summary, data analysts are linchpins to your data analytics strategy. They're a bridge to the business. They can be political assets or liabilities. They're a source of your data requirements, key to data literacy. You can align them by creating a federated reporting structure, creating an analytics council and community of practice. You can empower them by training them on business communications techniques and providing structured conversations with the business. And you can retain them by creating career paths and rotating them through different business units and departments. So with that, I am done. Now, Robert, is this the absolute end or can I take
This
questions?
is the absolute end. We got 4 minutes and we got to get, actually you're running your track moderator for the next session. So you got to introduce him. I just like to wrap up and say that, first of all, this has been a very necessary session for understanding of how data analysts can work in an organization. So hopefully for attendees, 157 people were attending the session. As Wayne says, he's listening. Please reach out to Wayne. Do you want to just leave your email again for everyone that wants to reach out to you?
Yeah, it's wayne@eckerson.com. And Robert, there's no session after this.
There is. There's one more session. Yep. 5:20 to 6 o'clock.
And I'm running it? Because I don't
you are the track moderator for this track. Yeah. So
okay. I'm glad you were on this because I didn't know it's not on my calendar.
Well, it's not on your calendar, so I'll make sure that is in your calendar. I'll just send you that out, but there is one more session. So stay on. It's the same link. You can just stay on the same link.
Yeah. All right.
Cool.
Good. Thanks everybody for listening. And if you have any questions, contact me. Love to chat.
Excellent. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Wayne.
Bye.